Good morning, everyone. In the last class, we are trying to discuss with the loops concepts here. So in the loop, we already identified while loop here, and after completion of this particular while loop, we are discussing with the do while loop. So initially, when we are discussing with the while loop, what we are doing here? So we are creating the two variable sections here, and after that, we are making one condition here. So what is the condition we are making here? Something called while n greater than b. So n we are making some 10 and the b value we are making something 20. Now this is the way what we are doing here. We are making the condition. If the condition is satisfied, we are entering into this particular block of code. So this is the way we can communicate with the particular while loop here. Now back to your do while loop. So in the do while loop, we are giving an option to first time is going to enter into this particular block. So later is checking with the condition here. Getting the point. Later is checking with the condition here. Now observe here, whenever it is checking the condition, so if the condition is satisfied, the loop is going to repeat one more time. So if the condition is not satisfied, what will happen here? It will back to the this particular cell, the remaining block of code here. So this is the way the particular do while loop is going to execute, and finally we have discussed the simple example on this particular for loop here. So carefully observe here, in the for loop what we are doing here, we are declaring the two variable, and what are the two variable we are declaring here? Int a comma b, these two variable we are declaring here, and after declaring the variable we are making the condition here. So like we already identified in the last classes, whenever we are making any for loop here, what we are doing here? So simply we are having something called, this block is going to have the initialization, and this is the block we are making something condition here. So this is the condition block up to this, and these are the iteration block. So this is very important whenever we are working with more than one variable. So this is the way we can check with the initialization condition as well as iteration here. Now back to here, after completion of this particular block, we are trying to print the variable. Right. So we'll check with the one more information how exactly we can work with here. And another example here, I want to make this particular code as a comment. And I'm working with the Boolean data type here, something called, initially I'm making, so initially what I'm doing here, the done variable I'm making as a false here. So after making this particular variable false, I'm creating one loop here. Int I is equals to 1, and observe the condition how I'm making here. Observe here how I'm making this particular condition here. And whenever we are making this particular condition, and if you want to check anything, if you want to check any variable, something called some method I'm trying to write here. So don't worry what exactly is going to indicate here. Interrupted. So this is the one method here. Let me create this particular method. Observe here, now what I am doing here. So by default, this particular interrupted method is returning false. So whenever this particular method is returning true, what I am doing here, internally I am making this particular, the boolean value become true. So carefully observe carefully. So the condition block, what we are doing here, the condition block here not done. Getting the point. So previously we are checking with some less than or greater than, but here we are working with the Boolean data types. So this is the one more type to make some condition here. So this is ignored as of now, but focus on this particular condition here. Getting the point. So once this particular condition is satisfied, what we are doing here, we are calling the one method, and based on the particular method returns, we are making this particular done as a true here. Right. So this is the way we can check it with this particular one more condition block here. Now, so we'll try to focus on the one more here. I want to specify with some different types here. Same here, instead of specifying here, what I can do. So this is the one more type. This is the one more type here. We'll make true here. And we'll check with whether this particular block repeated how many times. To work on that, what we can do, we need to make some block of code here, and after that something I value. Getting the point. Now we'll check here. We'll try to run the same example first. You can check here only one time is repeated. So why it is not repeated the second time? If you observe carefully, what we are doing here, so which condition is satisfied here, so you can check here. So int I is equals to 1, and whenever we are specifying this particular semicolon, so the initialization it's not going to take. The initialization is not going to depend here. Only is going to check this particular condition, and the second one here it is a iteration. So the iteration is going to happen based on this particular int value. But now observe this particular if block is returning true, and once it is returned true, what we are doing here, we are making this particular done is equals to true. And the second iteration, this condition is going to return false, because the done by default it is false, but after condition satisfied we are making true. So whenever we are making true, not true, it's become false. Getting the point. Whenever we are making this particular not condition, so now what is doing here, so it's going to work opposite. So initially it is false, so that it is returning true, but after that what we are doing here, we are making true, it's become false here. Once it is false, it's not going to enter into this particular loop here. The condition is going to, this condition is returning false here. So this is the way it is going to work. And here you can observe here what we are doing here, we are not specifying any initialization block. Getting the point. So we are not specifying any initialization block. So what we are doing here, simply the initialization is not going to check here, only the accepted result here, conditional block and iteration. So one more simple example. Okay, so carefully observe here, one more example I want to write here. Again, int I is equals to 0, and I want to make one more loop here. We are not going to specify initialization. So let me check this particular boolean also. The same variable I want to make here, but here what I am initializing here, The Boolean value I'm initializing false. So not done. Getting the point. And I'm not going to write any iteration also. I'm not going to write any iteration. Right. So there is no initialization. There is no iteration. How many times is going to repeat? How many times is going to repeat? So how many times, like when this particular block of code is going to return false? Getting the point. When this particular block of code is going to return false, the same time is going to return here. So we doesn't know when this particular condition is going to return false. So to understand here, what I am doing is, I want to print this particular sys out here, and here something called I is some I value, right? And after that, I'm making one condition here, I equals to 10. Getting the point. So now I'm changing the Boolean value to true. I'm changing this particular Boolean value true. So below, what I'm doing is, I'm making I++. I'm making the particular I++. So instead of specifying here, we are going to have option here to make it below. But which value is going to repeat? This particular I value, not from this particular current iteration here. Getting the point. If you are not specifying also, the value is going to, the loop is going to repeat. So we'll see the two cases here, how it's going to work here. The first simple example, how many times this loop is going to repeat? The loop is going to repeat 10 times here. So 0 to 10. 0 to 10, around 11 times the loop is repeated. But here, after that, what we are doing is, we are making one condition, I equals to 10. Once this particular condition is satisfied, the Boolean value we are making true. So carefully observe, I want to make this particular iteration false, like I commented this particular iteration false. So the second example I want to show you. So carefully observe here, how many times this loop is repeating. So you can still, the loop is repeating here. You can observe here, still is going on. Getting the point. So I'm stopping manually. Now you can expect here, the I value every time is returning 0. I value is returning 0. So to understand, to make some like increasable value, what I am doing is, I'm like added this particular I++ in the particular inside the loop here. But if you're not making also, the loop is repeating. The loop is repeating here. But only why we are using this particular iteration. So in some case we want to make this particular loop stop. Getting the point. So that's the reason we will make this particular iteration. If you are not making, so this condition is not going to satisfy at all. This particular condition is not going to satisfy because I value every time is returning 0. We want to make this particular I value 10 here. Right. So this is the way we can make this particular iteration here. Getting the point. And now, so carefully observe here, some cases if we go through the particular, the internal, the implementation code of this particular Java, some cases you are going to find this kind of for loops here. So that's the reason I want to provide how exactly it's working. Getting the point. And the final loop, I don't want to make any condition. I don't want to make any condition here. So what is exactly it's indicating here? So this is like there is no iteration and there is no syntax token where we are getting. Okay. So basically, carefully observe here. Now, what we are doing is, there is no initialization section and there is no conditional section and initialization, condition and iteration. So we don't have any section here, but you can observe how many times this loop is going to repeat here. The value is increasing here, I value is increasing, but the loop is not stopped yet. Why the loop is not stopped yet here? I want to stop here. You can check here the I values increase to so little this particular bigger value. Getting the point. But still the loop is repeating here. The loop is repeating here. So why the loop is it's not stopped yet? So there is no the condition section here. So this is we are going to call as a infinity loop. Infinity loops. So the condition is not going to satisfy at all. Getting the point. So this is a way we can make this particular loop based on our requirement here. Getting the point. So just I want to ask question. Any questions regarding this particular for loop here? So can you message me if you are having any questions regarding this particular for loop? Still, if you are having any questions, can you message me? Okay. So back to here, these are about the particular for loop here. So one more we are having that is called for each. So which is introduced in Java 1.5 onwards. So we'll try to check with how exactly one more the loop is going to work here. Something called so for each example. Inside the main method, now carefully observe. I want to make this particular number array. Getting the point. And here, what I am doing here, I am trying to initialize the value up to 9, or we can check with the 10. Okay. So 1 to 10 value I have initialized here. This particular value are now available into this particular num variable. Sorry. And after that, the sum I want to make here, I want to make the sum of this particular 10 numbers. Getting the point. So what we can do here? To work on this particular for loop, what we are going to do, initially we'll check with int I is equals to 0. Getting the point. And we are going to make I less than 10. And after that, what we'll do, we'll make this particular I plus plus. Later, now what we are going to do, sum plus is equals to num of I. So this is the way we are going to work with this particular for loop to get the sum of this particular 10. And right, so we'll try to focus on the sum here. We'll run the same example here. We can check this particular 55 we are getting. Right, now instead of working with this particular for loop here, we are having the one more option here that is called for each. So you can check here the for each style is look like this. So now what we are doing here we are not checking any the conditions and we are not checking any iteration. So there is no initialization section. Getting the point. Now what we are doing here, so directly we are working with a collection of objects here. So here we are working with this particular array, the array having more than one element. Getting the point. So it's going to work with the collection of object, and this particular collection of objects having which data type. Which data type it's having? The data type here int. So the same data type we need to specify. It's going to work on the same data type. So if we are working with the multiple data type, this style is not going to work. This style is not going to work. Again, we need to work with this particular for loop only. Getting the point. And this particular I is going to indicating here we are having the multiple values, and this I value is going to get one by one. So for example, when this particular loop is repeated one time, and this particular one value is going to added into this particular I value. Later second, later third. So like we are going to get in the particular I one by one value, but all the values are available in the particular num. Getting the point. So how it's going to check? Based on this particular collection of objects, how many collection of objects we are having internally. So based on that, the loop is going to repeat it. Based on that, the loop is going to repeat it here. So simply, now what I am going to do here, we'll try to check with I value. So we want to know like what exactly the I values we are getting. And later, what I can do, can I work like this? Basically, here it's not going to return index value. This particular I is not going to return index value. So getting the point. So see the difference here. This particular I is going to return the index value. So based on this particular index, we are getting the value from this particular array. Right. But here, this I value is going to return actual value which is available in this particular collection. So these are the differences we are going to find between the particular for loop and for each. So now what I can do, simply we can work with like the particular I. Okay, so now see the difference here. I want to make comment of this particular for loop and observe here high value 1 to 10. I value 1 to 10, and finally we are getting the same sum here, right? So if I am going to work this particular num, so carefully observe here. So what exactly we are going to get here? So we are getting some exception here, something called array index out of bound exception here, right? Why we are getting this exception, we'll see whenever we are discussing this particular exception related. But make sure here, I want to add the same here to understand how exactly it's working here. The system.order println will check first the number of I, how exactly it's printing here. You can see in the I1, what is the value we are having? 2. So carefully observe here, the 1 values we are unable to get. Why we are unable to get the 1 value? So because whenever this particular arrays concept is introduced here, how exactly it's going to insert the data. So we are creating this particular arrays concept here, and now, so this is the way internally it's going to store, and this is the 0 index 1, 2, 3 up to, you can imagine this is the 10. And what are the values we are having? 1, 2, 3, 4, something called in the 10th index also we are going to have 10. But this value, the I, we are not going to get 0. So directly we are getting the 1. Directly we are getting the 1. Why we are getting the 1 here? Basically, the for each is not going to work this particular index. The for each is going to work this particular actual value. Getting the point. So because of that, we are getting the 1. Right. So we are getting the 1. But 1, what we are doing here, we are making inside this particular num of I value we are getting 1. So again, this is the reference of this particular array list. This is the reference of this particular array list. So whenever we are specifying like this, what will happen internally? Again, the I value is going to check as a index. We are getting the 1. Now what is going to do here? Whatever the value available in the particular 1. So we are having 2. Getting the point? 2. So 2 index, we are getting 3. Getting the point? So this is the way the values are changing here. So see the difference between the particular array list and for each and for loop here. But observe, whenever we are working with this particular for each, what we are doing here, we are getting a array index out of bound exception here. So based on this particular 10th index, we don't have a data. We don't have a data here. So if you observe carefully, I want to create one more here, some bigger array list. Bigger array I want to create here because all the values it has to be stored this particular array. So I want to explain why this particular exception is coming here. So let me add 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, getting the point. So 1 to 10 values we added here, and the index every time whenever we are creating array, it will start from 0. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Up to 9 we are having the indexes. Getting the point. So whenever we are working this particular for each style, carefully observe here. Last value, what is the I value we are going to get? In the particular I, if you observe, the last value we are going to get 10. Getting the point. So as I explained, instead of working with this particular indexes directly, it's going to check with the values. The last value we are having 10. But now this particular 10, what we are doing here? I value. So I is nothing but 10. So you can check any 10 index is available. Any 10 index is available. Index is nothing but the below section. Getting the point. So in this particular num array, getting the point. In this particular num array is nothing but, so again it is pointing to this particular array. So what is the index numbers we are having? From 0 to 9 only. So 0 to 9 we are having. Getting the point. But so what we are doing here, we are trying to check with the 10th index. 10th index. The 10th index we don't have. So because of this, we are getting this particular exception here. Because of this, we are getting the particular exception. So we'll try to check with the more on this particular exception information, but observe carefully. Whenever we are specifying inside this particular braces, so what is going to do? Internally is going to check with this particular indexes. Right. And whenever we are not specifying any this particular array of directly if you are specifying something or I value, it is working with this particular actual I. So see the difference between when we are working with for each and for loop here. So any questions regarding this particular for each and for loop here? No? Okay. So now one more example I want to show you. The same value we are going to work with here, something called into sum the same and into number array we are going to work with 1 to 10 and the sum also will work with the same. And here after this particular sum instead of working with here, I don't want to make with a number array. We want to directly work with the I value. Here I is equals to 5. I want to make break here. Getting the point? Good question. Someone asking here, so using this particular for each, we don't have option to get it from the reverse here. Whatever the like collection values we are having, so just we want to iterate those values because we are not going to get the reverse order. So reverse order in the sense, again, we can work with the indexes here. Getting the point? Whenever we are working with the length -1, what we are going to do, we'll go back to the reverse behavior, and based on the particular reverse behavior, so we are going to specify the indexes value. So that is will not available in the particular for each style. Okay, so back to here, whenever we are working this particular I equals to 5, what I am doing is I am making this particular loop to terminate here. So to terminate is nothing but we want to make stop. Right, to stop this particular loop, we are going to work with a break here. So carefully observe. Let me save the example. Let me run the example. You can see up to the loop is repeated 5 times, and the 5 times value we are getting the sum of the 5 values 15, and the loop is break here. So whenever we are calling this particular break, we are unable to see after 5 values. Getting the point? So this is the way we can work with the break statement if we want to terminate the loop based on the some condition here. Based on the some condition here. And so we'll work with nested loops here. We'll try to work with the nested loops. How exactly the nested loops are going to work here. And using this particular for each, try to focus on the array concept here, one-dimensional array and two-dimensional array. We already identified the example. So try to focus on this particular for each concept to insert the data into the one-dimensional array and two-dimensional array. How exactly it's working here. So can you try it? So it's like some homework. Nested loops here. So how we can work with the nested loops and what exactly we are going to have the nested loops here. So to work on this particular nested loops, what I want to do, I want to comment this setup in this particular section. Right. And after that, what I am doing here, into I comma j. Here again I'm working with the for loops here. And observe here, I'm making one loop here that is called int I is equals to 0 loop, and the second one I'm making here j is equals to 0. The same condition I'm making something called j less than 10 and j plus plus. So this is the concept we are going to have the nested loops here. This is the like super loop, and this is the inner loop we are going to call. This is the outer loop, and So how exactly it's going to work and which scenario we can work with this kind of loops here. So observe now, after that, whenever we are specifying the particular inner loop here, I want to make one method called print method. I want to make print method. So inside this particular print method, what I'm doing here, I'm trying to print one star here. I'm not going to print anything here, just star. And after that, so one more loop I'm trying to print here. So the loop is going to print as a println. So we identified whenever we are making simple this particular println method, what we'll do, so it's going to print the message on the next line. It's going to print the message on the next line. So observe carefully how we are working with. This is the outer loop. When this particular outer loop condition is satisfied, it will go back to the inner loop. Right. So this concept we already implemented when we are discussing with the two-dimensional array. Getting the point. Now, so simple example. So these are the loops very important when we are working on the logical questions. Logical questions. Right. So carefully observe here what I am doing here. Sorry. So basically the loop is repeating how many times? 10 times here. So this value is 10 times and the next line is gone. Again it's printing 10 times. So the mistake here, so instead of working with 0, I want to make I here. So see the difference here. So now see the difference here. Observe here. How we are printing here? So we are printing something called maximum value to minimum value. So order, so this is very important here. Initially the condition satisfied up to 10. Getting the point. Later it's become 9, 8, 7 up to 1. So this is the way we are printing. So this is one kind of logical question. If you want to print value from top to bottom or bottom to top, some maximum value to minimum value. So this is the way we can work with the loops and make sure here. So the value how we are specifying here in the particular loops is very important here. Based on this particular initialization value only, so those values are going to change here. Right. Now, so check with using the nested loops here, try to implement some logical questions. So simple example we identified here. Simple example we identified here. So how it is printing. So try to focus on the more and more on this particular logical questions here. And back to here. So we already identified the particular break statements. So based on some condition, if we want to break, what we are going to do, and we'll specify the condition, and we are going to terminate the loop whenever the condition is satisfied here. And one more here, I want to break the particular loop here based on some condition, but here it is something different here. Right. So see the carefully how exactly I'm making here. I want to make comment of this particular loops here. And inside the main method, what I'm doing here, let me use same here. So we'll try to check with here. After the main loop here, so particular main loop, I want to make here something called outer. Observe here, I'm making one name of this particular outer loop here. And after that, I is equals to 0. So we don't want to make this entire 10 iteration. We'll check with up to 3. So up to 3, the iterations are fine. And we'll copy the print method. Instead of printing the star, what I can do, I value. Something called, so I'm trying to pass I value. And okay. This is the print method just I want to define. And after that, what I'm doing here, I'm creating one more loop here. So the loop here, j is equals to I. We're not going to work with I. Just simply we'll check with the 0. And the j is going to repeat how many times? 100 times. Right. And after that, so inside the j, what I am doing here, I'm making one condition here. I'm making one condition. So this particular j equals to 10. Getting the point. Whenever we are making this particular j equals to 10, what I want to do, I want to break. And after the break, what I am doing here, I'm making outer here. Getting the point. And so after that, this is the particular j block. And if this condition is not satisfied, we want to print j value. Whenever this condition is not satisfied, what I can do, something called j value. Right. So the j value, I value as well as j value is going to print. And after that, once this particular loop is completed, now what it will do? It will go back to this particular outer loop. Getting the point. So now, whenever it's going to the print of this particular outer loop, now I want to specify one message here. I want to specify something called this will not print. This will not print message I want to print. Why I'm printing this message here? Carefully observe here. Because whenever we are making the break here, what will happen here basically? The break is going to break this current loop. Getting the point? It's going to break the current loop. So we'll see how exactly it's going to work here. And after this particular, the above loop, I want to print one more message here. All loops are completed. So first we'll check with this particular the nested loops as well as using the nested loops how we can terminate here. So which loop is going to terminate here? Whenever we are specifying this particular name of the loop, wherever we are specifying here, so the particular loop is going to terminate here. What I am doing here, I am making the particular outer loop, right? The outer loop is going to terminate when this particular condition is satisfied. Once this particular outer loop is completed, again it will not go into this particular loop here. So it will come out of this particular line number 23. So this is I want to explain here. So observe carefully. Initially 0, right? Pass I value 0 and j value also 0 here. And after that, the j loop is printed 10 times. 0 to 9, the j values we are getting 10 times. And after that, you can check here, all the loops are completed. All the loops are completed. So for now, I want to remove this. What I am doing here, I am removing this particular outer here. So carefully observe here the difference between the name of the outer and now. So you can check here how many times we are getting here this message. More than one time the message is printing here. You can check here the pass value 0. First to the j value 1 to 10 is printing. Right. So this will not print message also we are printing here. And after that what we are doing here, you can check here the pass value. Now it is changes to 1. Getting the point. Again the pass value is nothing but the I value changes to 2. So after that the outer loop is condition failed. So when the condition is failed, now it's backing into this particular line number 23. So every time, even though this particular for loop, we are having 100 iterations, something called the condition we made as the j less than 100. How many times basically the loop it has to return? 100 times. But what we are doing here, we are making some condition here to stop the particular iteration. But here, whenever we are making this particular condition and break statement, so which loop is going to stop here? The internal loop, whatever the internal loop we are making, so the internal loop is going to stop, not the outer loop. But to stop this particular entire outer loop, what we need to do? So we need to make some name of the particular outer loop, and here we need to specify the same name here. We need to specify the same name here. Getting the point? So if I'm going to run one more time, you can see only one time the iteration is printed. So if I'm going to remove this, we are seeing the 3 times. 3 times is nothing but how many times this particular the outer loop is printed, like outer loop is going to repeated the same time the inner loop is also printing, even though we made the particular break statement. So this is very important here. So whenever we are working on the nested loops, if you want to stop the particular outer loop, we can work with this particular the break statement using the name of the outer loop name. Right. So we identified the break statement. We'll try to check with the continue statement. So what exactly the continue is going to work here? Getting the point. So we'll try to create one more example here to work on the continue. Something called continue test I want to create here. And so again I want to work with the for loop only. And int I is equals to 0, I is equals to 0, I less than 10, and I plus plus. And after that, what I'm doing here, I will print the message called this particular I value. Something called I. We'll see the I value. And after that, what I'm doing here, I want to make one condition here. I want to make one condition. So what is the condition we are making? I modulo of 2. I modulo of 2 equals to 0. So whenever the particular modulo operator is returning the reminder value 0, what I am doing here? Simply I want to make continue. So what it will do? Getting the point. What it will do, we'll try to check here. If the condition is not satisfied, I want to print some space. I want to print some space here. So carefully observe. First we'll see how exactly it's going to work here. Okay. Let me remove this. We don't want to use I. Observe carefully. I'm trying to provide the particular output some understandable format here. Okay. Now again I want to run. You can see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Now what I will do, so understand this particular how exactly this continue is going to work. Because break we identified, so directly it's terminating the loop, it's come out of the particular loop, right? And we'll try to check with this particular continue statement how exactly it will work here. And carefully observe here. You can check here. I'm trying to go for the line by line, so which is the shortcut keyboard here F6. Now you can see I value 0, it's printing. And you can observe here, whenever we are trying to provide the module operators, how it's going to work here, I value 0. So what is the reminder value we are going to get here? What is the reminder value we are going to get? We'll see first this particular if condition, what is returning? It's returning true, because 0 anything, we are going to get the reminder also 0 here. So that's the reason this condition is satisfied. We are using continue. Whenever we are making this particular continue, so carefully observe here from the line number 7 where it is going. Where it is going? Again, the value is repeated here. The value is trying to increase here. So this line is not printed. This particular line is not printed. So whenever we are working with the continue, the current iteration is going to stop it. The stopped is nothing but it's the whenever the condition is not satisfied, the current iteration is not going to execute it. It will go back to the one more iteration. Getting the point? So if the current iteration is stopped is nothing but if it is not stopped, what we need to do, basically we need to get this particular the line number 8. When this particular condition is satisfied with the continuous statement, what is doing here? Whatever the below statements we are having, it will not execute. It will not execute. So it's nothing but the current iteration is this terminated. Only one current iteration. The remaining iteration is going to work here. Observe here. Again the second iteration is coming. I value is increased. Now you can check here. The I value. I value is returning 0 or not. It's returning false here. When this particular condition is returning false, now we can observe here the below statement is executing. The below statement is executing. So now I think you understand how exactly it's working. So see carefully. Now the second value we are getting the remainder 0. The third value we are not getting. So because of that we are getting the third is printing here. And the fourth value. Again fourth we are going to get 0. And the fifth value is printing. Same way 6, 7. Getting the point. 8. And 9 also is completed. It's come out of the loop. Getting the point. So this is the way the particular continue is going to work here. Now observe how exactly the continue is working here. So we'll try to work with one more example. We'll try to work with one more example here. Same example. Let me comment this example here. And what I want to do, okay, sorry. Here I want to make something outer. The same I is equal to 0, I less than 10 and I plus plus. And after that, what I am doing here, one more loop I am creating into j is equals to 0 and so j less than 10 and j plus plus. One more loop I am creating here and I am going to make one condition j. So whenever the j greater than of I, whenever this particular j greater than of I, what I want to do, I want to open the one block here. Inside the block, I'm not going to print anything here. So simply I want to print next line here and continue outer. What I am doing here, I'm making the continue outer here. Once this particular block is completed, here I want to print some value. What is the value I am going to print here? Some space I want to print first and later here observe I am making one brace here. So whenever we are trying to work with multiple values here, we can work with this like this. What I am doing here, I am trying to multiply I and j value. I am trying to multiply with I and j value. Right, whatever the value we are going to get, that is I am using this particular print method. And after that, simple. After this particular if condition, I want to print one line here. Okay. So carefully observe here how exactly it's going to print. So initially I value 0, j value also 0, and this condition will return false. This condition will return false. What we are doing here? So we are trying to print some value. What is the value we are going to get? 0 we are going to print. And after that, what we are doing here? This loop is going to repeat. Right. The j values become 1. I value 0. So now this condition satisfied. We are printing one space here. And what we are doing here? We are making continue outer. What will do? Directly it will go to this particular continue is nothing but the outer loop. I value is going to change the I value 1. So carefully observe here. First we'll check with run as. Later we can check with debug as. Observe here how exactly the values are printing. Getting the point. So this is very important here. Now initially we checked with some maximum to minimum. Now we are checking minimum to maximum here. Right. Now we'll try to focus using this particular debug mode. So carefully observe here. I value 0. You can check with the left side section, and j value also 0. Condition is false. 0 is printing. Now j values increases to 1. If condition is satisfied, we are getting next line. What we are doing here? We are making like we are using the continue here. So where it will go? The outer loop. I is also changed 1. Still the j value 0. What happened now? Condition is not satisfied because j is 0, I value 1. Again 0 is printing. Now you can check here. Still this condition is not satisfied. We are getting 1. Now the condition is going to satisfy. What we are doing here? We are making something called continue outer. It's going outer. So check with 0, 2, 4. So this is the way the values are printing here. Getting the point. So this is very important here. Any questions regarding this particular continue, break, the nested loops and we identified? Any questions? Okay. So if we don't have any questions, so we'll like in tomorrow class, I'm going to work with the classes. Like as of now, we are working with the particular class information. So whenever we are working with this particular class, what are the advantages we are going to get and everything we are going to discuss from the tomorrow. The basic concepts we identified as of now, getting the point. From tomorrow onwards, we are going to create an object and we are going to discuss more and more. I'm requesting everyone try to practice as of now whatever the concepts we implemented. Right. And if we don't have any questions, we can conclude the today's session and we'll continue from tomorrow with a new concept here.